so much. I'd like to start by acknowledging, of course, that we're here in the legislature on the territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Esquimalt and Songhees nations. I want to thank everyone for joining us today on this momentous occasion. I'd like to, first of all, acknowledge the elders and the leaders who witnessed the introduction in the House today of Bill 2. And I also would like to thank Elder Shirley Alphonse of the Sooke First Nation for her prayer. I'd like to start by introducing the speakers, the three speakers who are joining us today. First, Minister Harry Bains, Minister of Labour. Second, Phyllis Webstad of the Orange Shirt Society. And finally, Eddie Charlie of Orange Shirt Day Victoria. Today's introduction of legislation to designate September 30th as National Truth and Reconciliation Day as a provincial statutory holiday has been a long time coming. For example, I've known Eddie Charlie and his colleague Kristen Spray for many years. We were in Ottawa. He introduced a private member's bill back in 2017 to commemorate nationally the Orange Shirt Day. And I also have worked with them since. I can say that we all will recall the shock, the sadness, the anger that followed the findings at the Kamloops residential school. That residential school and others in the residential school system attempted to assimilate BC's Indigenous peoples by stripping them of their culture, their language, their connection to their family and community and to the land. Many Indigenous children suffered physical, emotional, psychological, and sexual abuse at these institutions. And sadly, many Indigenous children died at them. This is the heavy truth of our history that we must confront as British Columbians and as Canadians. It's a truth that residential school survivors and their families have known for generations. It's a truth that is well documented in the report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. As the TRC described, reconciliation is a process of healing relationships. It requires public truth-telling, apology, and commemoration that acknowledges and seeks to address past harms. As a province, we too have a responsibility to remember the children who never came home. We have a responsibility to honor the strength, the resilience, and the dignity of survivors. We must acknowledge intergenerational and multi-generational harm that was caused by the residential school system and the healing journey of survivors and their children and their grandchildren. As a government, we have a platform to engage and educate British Columbians about our history. It is important that non-Indigenous people know that history so we can better build relations with Indigenous people from a place of humility, empathy, and respect. As a province, we must build a culture of commemoration and remembrance so that future generations know this history. The legislation introduced today represents one more step on that path, and we owe nothing less to future generations. I would now like to invite my colleague Harry Bains, Minister of Labour, to provide a few remarks.
Thank you, Minister, and good morning to everyone. I would like to acknowledge also that we are gathered on the territory of the Lekwungen people, Songhees, and the Esquimalt. And thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. It means a lot to us that Phyllis Webstad and Eddie Charlie were able to participate in today's announcement. It is my honor to share this podium with each of you. A short time ago, I introduced legislation in the House to enshrine National Day for Truth and Reconciliation into law and establish September 30 as a statutory provincial holiday beginning this year. This will give more people the chance to honor the strength and resilience of residential school survivors, remember the children who never came home. I'm proud and humbled to be part of what I consider an historic step as British Columbian, as we formally recognize the profound significance of meaningful reconciliation with Indigenous people in BC. If the legislation is passed, we will be joining federal government, Prince Edward Island, the Northwest Territories, Nunavut, and Yukon in formally recognizing the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. This day provides an annual opportunity for people to learn about our colonial history and how it has impacted Indigenous communities, and to participate in commemorative events in a similar way to Remembrance Day. In making this decision, we want to ensure that we listened to employers, workers, and fully understand how a new statutory holiday would impact them. Therefore, over the past months, we have engaged employers, workers in the province on how best to observe National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. We learned that they recognize the significance and importance of September 30 and the value of providing their employees with this opportunity, because reconciliation is about each and every one of us. All British Columbians and all Canadians have a role to play. This new statutory holiday will allow more people living in BC to get involved in advancing reconciliation. Formally recognizing the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is also in line with our government's promise to strengthen relationship with Indigenous communities and take meaningful actions toward reconciliation. I'm honored to see this happen today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Minister Bains. I would now like to call upon Phyllis Webstad, who is the founder and ambassador of Orange Shirt Society, to say a few words.
Wade Kuchwedep, Phyllis Webstad Rensquest, Stracham Chat Dum Slackwin. I'm Phyllis Webstad from the Kennew Creek Dog Creek First Nation outside of Williams Lake. I am from the Shawatmach Nation. I lived with my grandmother until I was 10 years old. That was an intergenerational impact. Then I lived with my aunt after that. As Granny had done for her 10 children, her eldest grandchild, then myself, she brought me to town to buy something to wear to go to school. I chose a shiny orange shirt. It was bright and exciting, just like how I felt to be going to school for the first time. I was unlike any other child at that age. When I got to the St. Joseph Indian Residential School, my shirt was taken and I never wore it again. So very quickly, that is how Orange Shirt Day started in 2013 and is now a federal National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And if this goes through, will also be a provincial stat. We chose September because that's the time of the year the children were taken from their homes and their families. We chose the 30th because we wanted teachers time to settle in, time to teach the children about what happened, and time for us to plan an event. There is no longer an excuse for anybody, no matter what age, to not know what happened to us and the history behind residential schools and the intergenerational impacts. Orange Shirt Day was created to have conversation at least once a year. Now I think it's every day about residential school, to honor survivors and their families and to remember those that never made it home. That's what Orange Shirt Day was created for. September 30th will always be Orange Shirt Day first. It's not a competition. When I talk, I say Orange Shirt Day, and I have a pause, and I say National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. It's both of those days. I'm humbled and honored that this has gotten this far. When we started Orange Shirt Day in 2013 in Williams Lake, it was just for the Caribou-Chilcotin area, and it hit social media, and I would never have dreamed that it's become what it has now. And it is a symbol all across Canada for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people to have conversation, honor survivors, and remember those that never made it home. So I look forward to being here when we can say that definitely, yes, it is a stat holiday in BC. Guksjam.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Phyllis, and thanks for your tireless efforts to educate all of us about the history of residential schools. I'd now like to call on my friend Eddie Charlie of Orange Shirt Day, Victoria, to say a few words. Eddie.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Minister. I'm very honored to be here today as the spokesman for Victoria Orange Shirt Day. I started doing this work with my good friend Kristen Spray when we were students at Commotion College, and we heard about Phyllis Webstad having her Orange Shirt Day at Williams Lake, and we decided that Victoria needs to hear this story as well. And we are very honored that this government has decided to bring forward this national stat holiday and make it a law, because we feel it's really important that people hear the story about residential school, the impact it has on children who were taken away from their homes when they were tiny, the impact that happened when these children were released into their communities as some of the most perfect hate machines ever because of the abuse that they experienced at residential school. Today, 50 years after I left residential school, I still wake up every day with remembrance of what happened to me as a child. And there are still thousands and thousands of children who must wake up every morning with the thought that many bad things happened to them when they were children. So we are very happy and we were very honored that this province, this government, has decided to create this national stat holiday to honor residential school survivors. I want to ask you to remember this, that we do not want to be a role model for the future children coming up behind us, because we brought so much pain, so much hate, and so much anger into our communities. And it impacted growth, not just with our communities, but the communities that surround us. And I don't say this lightly when I say this. Many people all across Canada hate Indigenous people because of who they are. Residential school changed us, made us into monsters that we are today. And I don't say that lightly when I say monsters. We have problems with alcoholism, drug addiction, violence. And having a national stat holiday like this gives us an opportunity to create a template for future generations to follow. Because we, residential school survivors, we don't want to be the template for the future generations. We want them to be the template that we follow. We want them to be the strong voice that we need, because we brought nothing but hurt, pain, and sadness onto these lands. And we are tired now. It's time for somebody else to say, I don't want this to happen anymore. So we're really grateful to Ray for allowing this day to happen. And we hope that people who heard us today will take our story into their communities and have meaningful conversation about what this day means. Because we all have a responsibility to make our country, our communities, our families, our schools, and our governments responsible, caring, and loving. And I raise my hand with my good friend Kristen to everybody here who participated in this day, and I thank you with all my heart. It's good to see him.
Thank you, Eddie. Thanks so much, Eddie, and thank you and Kristen for your tireless advocacy. Before I conclude the formal part of our agenda, I'd just like to acknowledge the presence here as well of my two critics, member of the legislature Michael Lee and of course Adam Olson. See other colleagues, Ms. Marks, Melanie Mark, and Mr. Dirksen here as well, but I just really appreciate everyone's presence at this moment. That concludes our formal part of the program, and I'd now like to turn it over to Tara Gustello to moderate any questions.
Thank you very much. A reminder to media on the line, please press *1 for the opportunity to ask a question and a follow-up here today. I will also invite media in the room to approach the microphone behind the camera stands if you'd like to ask a question. We will start in the room today with Francis Plourde, Radio-Canada. Francis, please go ahead.
Oui, question in French for Minister Rankin. Donc, journée fériée aujourd'hui annoncée pour la province. En quoi ça va aider à la réconciliation plutôt avec une journée comme celle-là? Et comment vous comptez faire que ça permette de respecter l'idée originale de réconciliation?
Ça, parce qu'il s'agit d'une recommandation, bien sûr, de la Commission Vérité et réconciliation du gouvernement fédéral, Monsieur le sénateur Maurice Sinclair. Et il s'agit d'une recommandation 80 de la Commission, rapport de la Commission. Et pour nous autres, c'est suivre l'idée, l'exemple du gouvernement fédéral et celle de l'autre province, l'île du Prince-Édouard et les territoires de l'ouest, du nord-ouest, du nord, qui ont eux-mêmes commémoré cette journée importante. Mais ce n'est pas une journée, un jour de congé, si vous voulez. Il s'agit d'un jour pour commémorer, de se souvenir de notre passé et d'essayer de créer un avenir qui est pour les enfants et les grands-enfants. Un changement énorme dans notre communauté, d'une côte à l'autre. Et pour nous autres, en Colombie-Britannique, ils disent aux Canadiens que nous allons faire une différence ensemble avec les communautés autochtones et non autochtones pour l'avenir.
Un suivi, Francis?
Non, c'est bon, merci.
Any more questions in the room? We'll go to Dirk Meissner, Canadian Press. Dirk,
Hi.
please go ahead.
I also have a question for Minister Rankin. Today, the federal government set aside, put $2 million for an organization out of The Hague to start work on possible moving ahead on identifying remains or how to start to identify remains from residential schools. If you, what do you feel about that?
Well, of course, the Government of Canada and the province of British Columbia have worked really well together after the findings occurred at Kamloops, and there's all sorts of subsequent work that was done in St. Joseph's and, of course, many, many other residential schools. And there's an effort to get to the truth, as I said earlier, truth and reconciliation. And to get to the truth may require that kind of investigative work, and I'm really pleased the federal government has taken that important step.
Follow-up, Dirk?
Yeah, can I ask Minister Bains? Who all gets to have sorry to say it this way, but a day off on September 30th?
Well, every worker who is covered under the Employment Standard Act is entitled to have a day off with pay. As Minister Rankin have said, I think the ministry and we will be working with communities, especially the First Nations, to ensure how do we make this day very memorable and commemorative, to learn about the history and how to continue to have a long-lasting reconciliation. So I think it's all workers who are covered under the Employment Standards Act.
Our next question comes from Binder Sajan, CTV.
Yeah, just wondering, I know there were calls before to make this a stat holiday in British Columbia, and I'm just wondering why now is the right time and why it wasn't done earlier.
Thanks very much for the question. We've tried really hard to work with our Indigenous partners and to work with stakeholders, industry, labor, others, to try to make sure that we get it right, to take our lead from First Nations as well, to make sure that this was a day that would go forward in the way that people wish it to go. I think the minister has spoken earlier. This is not a day, we hope, that will simply be a day off, as was suggested. It's a day for commemoration and reflection and humility and learning, and that is what we wanted to take the time to get right through those consultation efforts that were made across the province.
Binder, do you have a follow-up?
The state's actions, especially when it comes to like residential schools and, you know, the oppression of First Nations and Indigenous peoples, I'm wondering, do you think the government should take a lead then on Truth and Reconciliation Day in terms of organizing events and education for people?
That's an excellent question. When I was in Ottawa last week, I worked with Minister Rodriguez, the Minister of Heritage, and talked about how Heritage Canada could assist us with Commemorate Canada grants, which are available federally to assist, to make sure that First Nation organizations, nonprofits, perhaps municipalities and others can set the right tone and get the work done in the communities to make sure that we get it right. I think this, the fact that the federal government has already had such a day and the fact we're following suit gives us an opportunity to work really closely with them to get it right. Government does have a responsibility. That is why we introduced this bill today. And of course, we think September 30th will be a day that all Canadians, certainly all British Columbians, can use to try to figure out what a better future might look like, having understood better the past.
With great gratitude to everybody here today, that concludes today's event. Thank you.